pivot. 10 toes in when we standing on business. I'm a big stepper, underground methods. Top-notch hoes get the most, not the list.
Yo, what is up, everybody? You hear the music, so you know what time it is. That's right, it's time for the In Off the Bench podcast. I am your host, Daniel Ball, and I'm flying solo tonight because the boss, every now and then, our producer, Jim Cross, he gets a night off occasionally, and tonight is one of those nights where I get to do my thing. I get to throw all the rules out the window, and I get to talk whatever I want to talk and talk how I want to talk, and we're going to go ahead and label it explicit out the gate, and we'll see what he has to say, and I'll just face the repercussions afterwards. But we got a good one tonight. We're going to be talking poker, all things poker, with Chad Holloway of Poker News. But before Chad joins us, we're going to pay the bills around this place. The In Off the Bench podcast is brought to you by Chinook Seedery. Whether you're on the field or in the boardroom signing deals, Chinook will help you get the job done. Memphis City Design. Get your brands, gear, and logos on everything from shoes to underoos. You can also get your In Off the Bench gear while supplies last. Smith's Plumbing Services. You got a sink clog, drain clog, toilet clog, any kind of clog. If you're in the Mid-South area, call my boy Dustin so Smith's Plumbing Services can hook you up and take good care of you. Finally, Old Dominic Distillery. Experience 150 years of tradition in the heart of downtown Memphis. Whether you're into bourbon or vodka, whiskey to gin, Old Dominic's got you covered. Stop in today for a tour or to pick up your favorite bottle. And with that, the bills have been paid and we can get this thing going. Help me welcome onto the show with the biggest interview in podcasting this week, my man from Poker News, Chad Holloway. Chad, my man, what is up, dude? It's been a minute since we talked.
It has been, and I appreciate this. I look forward to it. And had I known you were wearing the Survivor Angelica shirt, maybe I would have worn mine.
You know, I should have thrown that out there, but it was like a last minute thing. You know, when you get down low and the laundry's getting stacked and you finally do laundry. I hadn't folded it, but I reached down there and what do you know? There's this old trusty Butte. Fits like a glove, man. I love it. But we got to get to you, man. I guess, a lot of times we just break the ice. So let's do that. Obviously, with you, I see a lot on social media. You do some traveling, you do a lot of things. But recently I saw you in a Dolphins jersey. And when we first met, we might have talked Dolphins a little bit, but it was getting close to the season, but it was far enough away where it wasn't the topic of conversation. But I will say to you, as a Dolphins fan, what does Tua do? Because everybody wants to know. What does he do?
It's an interesting question. We need Tua. That was clear on Sunday against the Seahawks, which I was at that game, and it was not pretty. It's clear our offense is built around him. My thinking as to what he should do, not being selfish, is whatever he thinks is best for himself, whether he's consulting with, medical professionals or his family. I would support any decision that he would make. I'd like to see him back. I think he probably wants to come back. I know the Dolphins will have him back at least for a little while. As to how his ultimate future plays out, I don't know. I'm definitely scared for him, though. Like everybody, every Dolphins fan, every football fan would be on edge anytime he gets hit,
Yeah, you got to bolster the offensive line. You're going to have to. Do you think he wears the new helmet that those guys won't wear?
I think he should. I think he could be like the pioneer of it, right? Introducing it into the game. They're already wearing it in practice and such. And if there's any candidate that should be wearing it, it should be him. They say that the Guardian cap is undefeated, if you will, and nobody's gotten concussed while wearing it. So why not? Yeah, it looks horrendous, but if it keeps him safe, I'd be all for it.
I think it's one of those things, though. If everybody wears it in 2 years from now, like nobody will, you won't even notice it. I don't think. I mean, it'll just look like the norm. But so before the season started, before all this went down, did you think that this was the year? Was, based on last year, the trajectory, the players coming back, like everything seemed to be lined up. Did you think this was the time?
I mean, I didn't know if it was going to be the time because we did lose some key players and we didn't necessarily replace them as we probably should have. But I didn't think we would fall as far and as quickly as we have. that part has been a surprise. I did think we'd at least get back to the playoffs. I was hoping for at least a playoff win. I mean, we haven't had one since the year 2000, and it doesn't look like any of that's going to happen right now, barring, I mean, Sunday's game was ugly, and they've got 3 games before the bye, and then they say Tua might come back. That's the only hope we have, is to maybe squeak out 1 or 2 wins between now and then, but I'm not hopeful after what we just saw. So, yeah, before the season started, I was hopeful, but we're just 3 weeks in, and that hope has already disappeared.
Yeah, it just goes to show you how incredibly important the quarterback position is, and like you can be a serviceable guy, but in order to win it all, you've got to be top notch, and you obviously got to have weapons around you. But Tua, to me, just he kind of made everybody else better, especially in that offense that they run. But moving off football a little bit, you're an avid comic book collector, right? This is I've done a little research. So when it comes to comic books, are you like a superhero guy? Are you a villain guy? What's your preference?
Yeah, so I'm definitely a superhero guy. I've been into like mainly Marvel comics since I was a kid.
Right.
As for the hero villain thing, a little of both. You can't see it because I'm wearing long sleeves, but I have some tattoos of some Marvel characters. On one side, I have Nightcrawler from the X-Men, who's a good guy, but on the other side of my arm, I have Mr. Sinister, who's a very bad guy. So I've always liked the dichotomy of, you know, in between is where most people lie. Nobody's a pure hero, nobody's a pure villain, but there's somewhere in between. So I don't know. Comic books have always been a fun medium for me to read and enjoy, and of course, enjoying the movies that have sprung out here over the last 15 years or so.
What what's your favorite series?
X-Men, without a doubt. I've always been an X-Men guy. In fact, earlier this year, I completed my childhood dream of owning every single X-Men comic from 1963, number 1, up till 544 when they kind of switched the series over. So it was a long project, a long goal, but finally made that happen. So I feel like I've won comics, if you will. So
Hey, you had a goal, you reached it, and I mean, that's your thing, dude. Like, I remember as a kid, there was this board game. It was an X-Men board game, and it had like every little like character that I could think of as a kid. And I feel like when I look back on it, just thinking about the powers that they all had, I think Nightcrawler was a very underrated superhero, like for a Marvel guy. Um,
I feel
but
like I can picture that board game in my head that you're talking about. I had it, of
you've
course.
yeah, you've probably played it 1,000 times. I just remember me and my friends, we used to play that thing religiously, and we used to watch X-Men, and it was crazy. But what's the most impressive book that you got in your collection?
I mean, having an X-Men number 1 is definitely like a key holy grail book for me. It's pretty rare. Mine's beat up, as a comic book that's almost about 65 years old might be. But I've also got a first appearance Wolverine, which is a very popular book. That was kind of my first ever big purchase for a comic. So I'd say between those two are kind of my 2 favorites, if you will.
All right, so what's the one book that has eluded you? What's the one that you wish that you had?
I think the one that I regret because I had an opportunity with it was a first appearance Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy 15. This was like in 2007 or 8. It was at a half price bookstore, and they wanted like $1,500 for it, which is a steal. I just, back then I wasn't big into poker. I wasn't winning money. I didn't have an expendable income. So I just really couldn't afford it. And I've always regretted passing that one up. And I've yet to have another opportunity to acquire one without paying, mucho bucks for it. So that one definitely sticks with me.
Is there, the comic scene, is there a lot of like fakes, and like you got to watch out for, like, if you're going looking for a specific series or book, is there a lot of like duplicates out there that people are trying to knock off and get over on people?
Yeah, there is, especially since the whole grading business, like in sports card,
Yeah.
grading it's the same thing in comic books. And so you always got to be looking out for, fake books that might be misgraded, just pure knockoffs. For me, I don't try to get into it too heavily like a lot of people do. For me, it's just always been a hobby. And once I completed my X-Men run, I was kind of like, you know what? I'm not going to buy any big books unless, a deal comes up that's too good to pass up. I'm not going to seek them out. For me at this point, it's just like, all right, I'm just going to read them. I'm just going to enjoy them. I'm not ready to dive headfirst into the whole collecting of it in a hardcore manner because to me it is too risky.
Yeah, it's a strange, like, for some, I just don't understand, like, people that go into, like, that whole, I guess, just to make a buck, but it seems like a lot of work to have a fake out there and try to pull it over on people, especially where you're at, because I feel like in Vegas, there's a lot of experts out there and you can get a lot of eyes on something, and it's probably I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I feel like it would be a lot easier to get someone over to check out something for you, to just to kind of verify the authenticity of it.
Yeah, I mean, getting one on over somebody who's experienced like myself would not be an easy thing to do, right? I'm a very skeptic by nature. I have a motto like I trust you with my life, not my money or my wife. So when it comes to things like I am very diligent, but there are a lot of people who aren't. They're very naive, they're easy to take advantage of, and I think that's the sort of people that people, do target. So I hope people, if they're going to spend a lot of money on a comic book or a baseball card or whatever it might be, are doing their due diligence because there are people out there looking to get one over and take advantage.
Well, let's get into this, man. Obviously, we could sit here and probably talk, dolphins and comic books all day, but the reality is the podcast wants to know your story, and that's kind of the reason I wanted to have you on. Is you have, when we first met, and granted, we were playing a LRG, a live reality game, and we had spent, what was it, maybe an hour and a half together, like outside of the game in a car traveling. And I told the producer, Jim, my co-host, I was like, man, this is one of the most intriguing guys that I've spent an hour and a half with. Like, the story, just like what he does. Like, I was like, we got to have him on to kind of share the journey, and talk just about it, because I don't think an hour and a half did me justice. Selfishly, I wanted to know more about you. As crazy as that sounds, but it's the truth. I felt like I was reading a book the whole time when I was talking to you, and I was just hanging on every word. I was like, man, I just want to sit here and just chat with you even longer. But so with that, let's talk about it. You're a Wisconsin kid. Where at in Wisconsin did you grow up?
So I grew up in a town of about 550 people called North Freedom. It's about 10, 15 minutes outside of Baraboo, which is our big city with 10,000 people. It's where I went to high school. It's known as Circus City. And all that's about an hour north of Madison, Wisconsin, north of the capital.
So what, North Freedom, if I went there, what's the one thing that you're like, dude, you got to experience this, try this, taste this, eat this, talk to this person? Like, what is the one thing?
There is literally only one thing to do in North Freedom, unless you want to go to the one bar that's in town for a drink or for some food. But North Freedom is known for the Mid-Continental Railroad Museum. So there's a big train museum there that's got a lot of history, a huge collection. And they actually do some pretty cool stuff. So that's what North Freedom is known for. And pretty much, like I said, the only thing to do there.
So did you got mom, dad in the picture? You got brothers and sisters? What's the family tree look like?
Yeah, so I grew up in North Freedom. To mom, dad, I have a half sister from my dad's side who's 13 years older than me. My parents split when they were young, or when I was young, rather, when I was just 7 years old. They're still in my life, thankfully, still back in Wisconsin in the same general area. But I pretty much grew up with my mom in the trailer park in North Freedom, and spending weekends every other weekend with my dad. And it was in that small town where I learned to play poker in the first place, because in a town that small, you get to know the other kids. I'm, 41 years old, and I'm still best friends with all of those guys. We still, play fantasy football. I'm going back to Wisconsin in a week. We're going to hang out. So we grew close. And at some point, we just started playing cards. And there was a restaurant in town at the time that I remember going in the summers. This is probably when I was 8, 9 years old. I've got a picture of me and 4 of my friends sitting in a booth playing 5-card draw. And what we used to do is order a plate of French fries. They came to $1.26 with tax. I remember this very clearly. And we would use the French fries to bet. That was what we would ante with and raise with. And we did that like every day, every summer for several years. And then as we got older, we started, anteing up baseball or football cards, cigarettes and quarters at one point, and I just kept going.
The stakes increase, man. So, I mean, you were hustling your friends for French fries back in the day. How old were you? Like,
Yeah,
you
like
could have been like
7, 8, 9 years old, something like that. I don't remember when I first learned cards, but that's my first memory of playing cards. So,
yeah, I was pretty similar. My grandparents, I would say once or twice a month they would do like a family poker night, and it was just like a table with cigarette smoke, and they would play with like dimes, nickels, and quarters, and they would play all kinds of games. 7-card stud, 5-card stud. They would play like games called like Macintosh, and just games that maybe people have never heard of, but like I remember vividly getting secondhand smoke, the whole nine, sitting in people's laps, betting money, just learning cards that way. And I was like probably the same age, 5, 6, 7, like as young as I can remember. But um, I enjoyed those times. And like as probably as a kid, you probably shouldn't be introduced to gambling maybe at that age, but like I wouldn't trade it for anything. So obviously, when you talk about, you know, cards in your life at a young age, and considering what you do now, it had an immediate impact. And whether it took you to where you're at, it definitely helps probably provide a bridge to how you got there. So, um, growing up, you know, obviously you I was gonna say, were you just a poker savant as a kid, and you just hustled everybody, and that's how you made some coin, or did you guys play sports? And what did you do?
I mean, we definitely played a lot of cards. There was some sports in the summers and things like that, but nothing too serious. A lot of board games, just games in general, video games. Growing up, the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Nintendo
Oh,
64 were all big things. And then yeah, poker was a common strand throughout that. I mean, there was a period of time when we were all just out of high school, working meaningless jobs that we had, that we would, when we were all done with work, would get together and play poker at somebody's house every single night for like 3 years, and without fail. And I don't know, like I've just always been good at it. I think I took to it. I saw the math side of things. I have a good intuition on reading people, and it all just came into play in helping me succeed a little bit. And throughout the years, one by one, other people fell off, whether that was, found a new job, moved away, got married and whatnot. Whereas I just kept going with it, and ultimately, kind of have gotten to where I'm at today, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
yeah. So I guess the biggest question that people have is, all right, how does a guy from Wisconsin end up in Vegas? So like, how does that transition? Was it strictly the job, or was it something where you go, I want to be closer to the action. Let me move down there.
It was really just a series of events. So I ended up, playing poker throughout college, just recreationally, bar leagues with friends, nothing too serious. Went to UW-Madison, University of Wisconsin-Madison, where this was like 2006. I graduated in 2007, and then ultimately went to Tulane Law School in New Orleans in 2007, 2008. And these were very formative years, not only for myself, but in the poker industry as a whole, because in 2003, a gentleman named Chris Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker main event, and it sparked what we call the poker boom. All of a sudden, you
Yeah.
see on TV, the field sizes just grew. And so when I was in New Orleans, they had a casino there, Harrah's New Orleans, and that's where I just started playing and doing really well. I mean, back then, if you had experience and knowledge like I did, it really wasn't a question of if you were going to win, it was how much you were going to win. The game is much different now. It's not the case, anymore like that. But back then it was, and so, ultimately I ended up spending too much time at the tables, not studying law, and then after my first year, just decided to, like I'm not really going to enjoy this. I'm not applying myself like I need to. I'm going to take a temporary leave of absence, which is what I did, which has turned into 15 years now, and then move back to Wisconsin. not knowing what I was going to do with my life. And, I had a history degree. I had a natural ability to write. And I thought, you know what, maybe I can find a way to write about poker, combine my talent with my passion. Ultimately, I did that and found a small website that allowed me to write poker articles. And then in 2009, there was a poker publication called Bluff Magazine that's now defunct, but they were hiring interns for the World Series of Poker in Vegas. And I applied and I got accepted. And so I remember I had to take out a bank loan for a couple $1,000s just to afford to drive out to Vegas. And that was my first foray into the poker industry, very low on the totem pole. And then really fast forward over the next 15 years or so, built a career in the industry, and then ultimately relocated to Vegas full time 2 years ago to, like you said, pretty much be closer to the action.
Yeah. So everyone who thinks that just playing poker is a grind, being in the field of poker, no matter what area, it's a grind. And it seems like, obviously you knew that you wanted to have something you were passionate about to be your job, and you started at an internship and worked your way through. And I think one of the things that people have a tough time with now is understanding that concept of they come out of school or they come out of this and they immediately want to jump like to the top, when sometimes you got to earn your stripes, sometimes you got to grind it through, and you got to start at the bottom and work your way up. And I think there's something to be said for people that put in the effort and time and dedication and blood, sweat, and tears into doing that. So I tip my hat to you, man, because that's a huge move from Wisconsin to inevitably going to Vegas to do that. And I don't think I have that in me, but I wish I did. So a little envious of that, Chad. You're the man, dude. You are the man.
Well, I mean, I appreciate it. It certainly hasn't been easy, and I've been fortunate enough to, I'm not tied down, if you will. I've had the flexibility, freedom, and support of my family to do it. And I certainly, as you described, put in my dues, so to speak. I wrote a lot in the early days for free or next to nothing, and just slowly built that network, built that resume, and slowly but surely worked my way to the top. Now, make no mistake, at one point in time, I wanted to be a poker player and make my living playing poker solely. But I just realized at some point in time that, and it's not easy, it's tough, and the game has only gotten tougher. And the swings, I'm a mentally strong person, but I'm not mentally capable of weathering the swings of poker. And you can play your best game for 2 months straight and still lose because there is a lot of variance involved. So I found my sweet spot is to find a job within the industry and still play on the side and take my shots here and there. And, in a big way, I was lucky in 2013 as a player. I won a World Series of Poker gold bracelet, which is, the equivalent of winning a NFL Super Bowl ring or an NBA championship ring in our industry. So that was really a life-changing experience, both, personally and professionally.
Just so people know, he's not blowing smoke. I asked him in the car about this, and he just whipped out the bracelet, and I loved it.
I always keep it,
There it is,
real close. It's a little, because it's on blur, but
yeah.
That's it right there. So,
I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, obviously, you're if you can win that, that means you are definitely you're much closer to a professional. If you're not a professional, like I think that constitutes being a professional when you win that. But I guess, for you, what is your favorite poker game? I read that you were a pot limit Omaha guy. I don't know how true that is, but I'll ask you from your own mouth, like, what is your favorite poker game?
Yeah, it's pot limit Omaha. I really enjoy it. No limit hold'em is what everybody knows and plays. It's what I often play in tournaments and stuff too. But it can be a slow game. Whereas in pot limit Omaha, you get 4 cards. There's a lot more action. You don't have to sit and wait as long to mix it up, if you will. So I just enjoy the fast pace of it. I feel I'm pretty good at it, and it's just the game I enjoy the most. So,
Was it difficult? Like when you look at, you know, Hold'em, and then you look at Omaha. Is there a difference in how you play and strategy and how you become good at one or the other? Or if you're good at one, does that mean you can be good at both?
Yeah, being good at one doesn't necessarily mean you'll be good at both, but I do think it means you have the capability to be, right? So all poker games are rooted in the same rules or hand rankings, if you will. Usually have the same
Right.
gist, not all, but most. And so it's just adapting to the little differences in the game. And some people can do it and some people can't. I've always been good at it, right? So getting 4 cards instead of 2 changes things considerably. And, just being able to adapt to that. Now, I've had years of experience. I've written articles where I used to have to review the best players in the world playing pot limit Omaha and writing about these hands. And so subconsciously, as I'm doing that, I'm also learning, I'm studying, from the best. And I think that helped me quite a bit to adapt. And there are literally hundreds of different poker games out there, different variants. I'm well versed in several, but there are still games that I'm learning. But because I have the basic foundation of poker, it makes it a little easier to learn everything. So
Yeah. Definitely I'm not an Omaha guy. I think it's just because um I never really had anybody play it. And I think maybe there's a fear to sit down at a table and learn it on the fly. I don't think that's the way to do it, but um I don't know. It just 4 cards. It just seems like it's a lot more intense than the traditional, 2 card, hold'em style poker. But
it
um
is like in no limit hold'em, you can find spots where you get it in against an opponent where you are an 80 or 90% favorite, right, to win the hand
right.
based on. You're rarely going to find that in Omaha. It's going to be much closer to 50-50 or 60-40 almost every time when the money goes in. So there's a lot more variance, a lot more gamble to PLO. Some people love it, like myself, and some people don't. So they steer away from it.
So you also were the poker industry champion in 2019. What does that mean? To me, that means in the poker industry, you're the best player for that year. Um, but you said you're not a professional, so I want you to clarify. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, I wish it meant that. It doesn't. It was a very well respected poker tour organization decided to host a yearly, well, it was supposed to be yearly poker industry championship that was only open to people who worked within the industry. So whether it's people like me who work on the media side of things, dealers, floormen, whatever it might be. Um, and they held the first one at Rolling Thunder Casino in California. I went up there. It was a very small field, but like I said, I like to joke that it took the World Series of Poker main event 5 years to eclipse the number that I won. So there was only 19 people in the field when I won it. Whereas the WSOP main event in the first year only had 6. But it was the first one. They were trying to get it to grow, and then of course the pandemic happened. So the ongoing joke is I'm still the first, only, and currently reigning poker industry champion in the industry. So
Do you think that's something they'll bring back at some point?
I would like to see him do it, and I occasionally message with the organizer of that tour, like, "Hey, when are we going to do this? I want to be there. I want to try to defend my title." And I think it's good to recognize the industry people who are working hard. There are a lot of people who want to, play poker, but might not have the opportunity, the ability, the means to do it. And I think that's a good tournament to give them that opportunity. And they're not playing against professionals, right? They're playing against their peers. And it was fun. The first one we did, while it was small, everybody had a really good time and it was really well done. So yeah, I'd definitely like to see him do it again.
What is I mean, there's got to be a balance, obviously, with you're not a professional poker player. You enjoy playing. Obviously, you want to win, don't get me wrong, but like what is the balance between and I find this hard, enjoying yourself and the fact that you could lose or win. Like it seems like some people have so much seriousness and intensity in it that if they lose, they just don't have a good time. And if they are winning, they're still not having a good time. So like how do you find the balance in like just enjoying the fact that you get to play cards?
It gets hard the more you play, the longer that you're in the game, so to speak. And I mean this in this regard. I if I play cash, right? There's a difference between cash and tournaments. I prefer tournaments, but when I do play cash, which is rare nowadays, it's because of this simple fact is if I go and play cash and say I buy in for $300, if I win 600, so I'm profiting 300 or even a little more, like that's great. It makes me feel good, but it doesn't get me super energized. Whereas if I lose that $300, it's going to piss me off and it's going to ruin my day. And that imbalance just doesn't make it enjoyable in a lot of regards, right? So like,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a weird thing, but it happens to a lot of poker players. It's a topic that we talk about a lot in our industry. Um, and yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. Tournaments are a lot more fun for me because it's you put up a buy-in, whatever it might be, and that's it. You know, you get to play for as long as you're in the tournament and have a chance at a bigger payday. If you bust, you know, so be it.
Yeah. And do you, when you play tournaments, do you know, or do you just go, oh, I feel like playing today, let me go see what's available? Or do you know like, oh, and next month I'm gonna play in this because they have this tournament every single year or every single month or every single Saturday? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a little of both. You know, being in Vegas, I have poker all around me, which is great because if I do feel like it, I can just look up a tournament and go play. But for the most part, myself and other poker people set their playing schedule around different stops at different parts of the country or all around the world. So, for instance, in December here in Vegas is the World Poker Tour World Championship. It's a big stop. A lot of people come in. There's great events. So people, you know, will mark their calendar for that and plan on playing that if they're able. Likewise, when I'm back in Wisconsin, I always pull up. All right, are there any poker tours nearby in Chicago or Minneapolis? And if there are, and it works out, maybe I'll make a trip down there to play. So um, it just depends what you know, when, where, how much, you know, all that sort of stuff.
Tell your boys to cash in their fries and y'all trade it in for some chips and go down there to Chicago or Milwaukee or Sheboygan or wherever wherever's close. Um, Poker news. Let's get into that. Obviously, that's your current place of employment now is poker news. How do you get from where you were into poker news? Like what is the one thing? Did you just apply or did somebody reach out to you and go, hey man, like been seeing what you've been writing, been seeing what you've been doing. We'd love to have you on board.
It's interesting. So if you remember back earlier when I told you I interned with Bluff Magazine in 2009 at the World Series of Poker, that was my fanboy experience. I basically broke even, you know, by the money I spent to get there and what they paid me. It was like a break even proposition, just me going out there, living the dream for a little bit. But in my mind at the time, it was going to be a one and done sort of thing where I'm going to go out there, I'm going to have fun for the summer, but I'm going to come back and figure out my life, right? I dropped out of law school. This has just been fun, but I'm not going to be able to make a living off of this. And so I ultimately came back to Wisconsin and I decided, well, I've got a history degree. The only other thing I can do aside from law school really is teach, right? Teach. And so I went through an accelerated program where I got all my credits. And in the spring of 2010, I was doing student teaching. All I needed to do was complete student teaching. I would have been licensed and I probably would have went into a career in teaching. And I was about, I don't know, a month away from completing that. And I've already sunk 4 months into it, you know, unpaid student teaching. When it was getting close to the summertime, and I said, you know what? I've got that itch again. I know the World Series is coming. Wonder if anybody's hiring. And I remembered a guy I had met named Mickey Doft who worked for a company called Poker News, which I didn't know about, but I met him in 2009. So I reached out to him and he put me in touch with somebody. He said, send me, you know, some samples and whatnot. So I did, and they came back. They said, we would like to hire you for the summer. We're going to pay you, I think it was like $7,500, which for me at the time was a lot of money. And it was a lot more than I got paid in 2009, the year before. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. However, they needed me out there on a certain date that just so happened to be about a week before the student teaching would finish. And I went to the student teaching people and said, hey, here's my situation. Could I possibly end this a week early? They said no. So it was a big life decision for me in that moment. Like, I've invested all this time. This is probably my future career. Am I really going to sacrifice this to go out to Vegas for another summer, have more fun? And, I talked to a lot of people. Most people advised me against it. And then I talked to my best friend, and it was like a non-hesitation thing. He's just like, yeah, of course you're going to do it. Like, that's your passion. That's your dream. Of course you're going to do it. And it clicked in my brain, like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And so I did. I left student teaching, went out there for the summer, with the goal of just, having fun, make a good impression, hopefully get invited back. I did all of those things clearly, because about a month later, when I was starting to think about going back to student teaching in the fall, I got a message from my boss from that summer at Poker News. And I'll remember this. I remember where I was at. I'm sure I still have the email asking, how would you like to go to Argentina? Because there was a poker tournament coming up in Argentina. And I was like, hell yeah. And long story short, from that moment on, I pretty much, between 2010 and 2016, I was on the road about 220 to 240 days of the year with Poker News, all around the world, South America, Asia, Australia, Europe. And it was a dream come true. It still is. I still get to travel quite a bit, but to get paid to travel and work in an industry I'm very passionate about, I just got very lucky, because it really wasn't this wasn't a job that you would find on LinkedIn or something. Like, this was
Right.
very niche, very something I had to learn and build as I went along. And looking back on it, just very fortunate.
Yeah, I mean, you are currently, and I don't know if this title still stands, but PR and media manager. So you do a lot of writing, you do a lot of live reporting, you do the podcast. What does PR and media manager mean?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've been with Poker News. I mean, there's one other guy based in Europe who's been there as long as me, maybe a little longer. But aside from that, everybody has come and gone, and I've remained. And because of me, all the articles, all the traveling, a lot of people now associate me with Poker News. Like, if you ask them, what do you think about Poker News? My name would be closely, aligned. A lot of people think I own Poker News, which always makes me laugh, because we are literally part of a billion-dollar corporation. But that's how closely my personal brand is aligned with the Poker News brand. So I started out, live reporting, going to events, writing about hands of the tournaments, then writing articles. Slowly, my job is just shifted. I'm a little jack of all trades within the company, but right now, PR and media manager basically means a couple things. So it is public relations, but it's also PR player relations, because I've had, such experience in this network with some of the highest stakes players in the world. I'm the guy that makes sure those relationships stay healthy. I'm the guy that reaches out when we need to, get comments, report a story, anything like that. I also work with mainstream media when something happens, and just kind of the fixer in a lot of regards. If there's a controversial situation or story, like, because of my network, my time in the industry, I'm usually the guy that can go in there and patch it over. So, and then I also host the Poker News podcast, which is in studio show that we do here in Las Vegas. Me and two of my co-hosts, we get together every week, talk about the biggest poker stories that are out there, and that's been a lot of fun, because for many years I was behind the scenes. Everybody knew my name, Chad Holloway, but they didn't know my face, and now my face is getting out there a little bit more, which has been a lot of fun.
That's good, man, because now they can they know when you write an article that they don't like, they know who to come talk to.
There was a situation just like 2 weeks ago where some people within our company did something without letting me know, and all of a sudden people started flooding my inbox, like, hey, what's going on? Why did you do this? And I'm like, I don't even know what's going on at this moment. And so I had to go figure it out. And I get that a lot. Like, even if it's nothing I've done or been involved in, if Poker News has done it, people just attach it to me. So that is both the pros and the con of being so closely aligned to the brand.
But you're the right guy, man. You're the fixer. Remember that. You're the fixer. Um, what does one have to do to get a job with Poker News? Can they just apply? Do they have to have like a background in writing? Like what are the opportunities that Poker News has out there for people?
Yeah, so occasionally we'll have some full-time gigs open up, but they are pretty rare in this industry. What most people do is take the same route that I did, and that's when the World Series of Poker happens every May, June, and July in Vegas. That's when most poker companies, Poker News, and many others have to staff up, right? We need more people because of how busy and important it is. So around February or March of every year, we start building our team for the summer. And that's really when people can get their foot in the door, if you will, as usually a live reporter, somebody who will come to the tournaments, capture hands. You don't necessarily need to be a good writer. It helps certainly, but if you love poker, if you know poker, that can be a start as well. And then those who come and do a good job could potentially lead to other opportunities, like me getting to go to Argentina. There were people who worked for us this summer who did a good job, who then got invited to go to Barcelona recently and will continue to get invited. And you kind of just continue to do that, build the experience, build the resume, build the reliability, show, and that will lead to more opportunities. The further along that you go. And it's not for everybody though. It is long hours. It's a lot of travel. It can be a very thankless job. You really do have to have a passion for poker. And so that's kind of what I tell people, because I get people reaching out all the time looking, to do it. And when I did the same thing, I reached out to people back in 2009, like, hey, I want to work in this industry. What can I do? And almost everybody to a T said, don't do it. You can't do it. It's too hard. There's not enough opportunities. And I understand where they're coming from, but I'm also on the flip side of it. Like, I ignored it. I pushed through and here I am. So I know it can be done. Yes, it is tough, but the cream does rise to the top, both as poker players and poker media, so to speak.
It's what my favorite wrestler of all time used to say. The Macho Man. He used to say, "The cream will rise to the top, baby." And it's so poignant, and it hits home with you because you are very respected in the industry. You've worked your way up. You are at the top. I mean, when I went on Poker News and just looked up articles, and I would say there's a plethora of articles right there on the homepage written by you. And it's cool to be able to go out there and go, "Oh man, that was a great article. I know that dude." Like, but with that, it's nice to know I still have a chance in the poker industry. I could still be, I just gotta, man up and go out there and maybe, help out. I don't have to be a good writer, you said. I can just capture some hands, man. I can do that.
Well, I occasionally need a co-host on the Poker News podcast as well. And clearly you've got the poker or the podcasting part of it down.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a face for radio is what people say, so I'll
You and me
take
both.
it. Um, what knowing of all the articles that you've written, what is the one story that you feel like you're the most proud of? Is there one, or is it hasn't been written yet?
There definitely is. It probably always will be. I imagine it would be hard to beat. I've always loved poker history. As I said, I was a history major. I just love history, the history of the game. The old Texas road gamblers, the Doyle Brunsons. The smoky saloons, that sort of thing. And back in 2013, which is the year I won my bracelet, very big year in my life, there was on Twitter a thread about this guy named Bob Hooks. He was an old school Texas road gambler who was around in the early days of the World Series of Poker, finished second in the main event one year. Just a guy who I knew the name of through the poker history books. But everybody thought, he's probably dead, right? He's got to be really old by now. And even Doyle Brunson, he had a tweet where he was talking about Bob Hooks. And he said, yeah, I lost touch with him decades ago. I think he's passed away or what have you. I just happened to be reading this Twitter thread, and there was an account that replied to it. This account had like 20 followers, just saying Bob Hooks isn't dead. He's living in a hotel at our hotel down here in East Texas. And I thought that was very interesting. So I DM'd the person, a nice girl, and she's like, yeah, Bob Hooks, he lives in our hotel. He's been here. She told me the story, what have you. And I'm like, oh, I gotta get down there. So I requested permission, a budget, and I went down there, flew down there, and I spent 2 days interviewing Bob Hooks, this guy who was around in the early days of our industry, who everybody thought was dead, who would end up passing away a couple years later, unfortunately. But to capture the stories that would have passed with him and to be able to bring that into our poker industry, it's still there. That story is still there. That meant a lot to me. It was very personally rewarding. It was just like that. That's the sort of stuff that I get passionate about, and without a doubt, is my favorite thing that I've written.
I mean, that's crazy. Did you tell him that people think that he's dead?
Yes. So here's kind of the funny part.
What is his reaction? It's like, hey man, just so you know, like people don't think you're alive, dude. Was that by design? I mean,
no, it was. So first off, like I planned with this girl to go down there, rented a car, drove there, and she tells me when I get there to their hotel, she's like, "So he doesn't know you're coming." And like I'm like, "Wait, what?" Like I'm spending all this time, money. What do you mean he doesn't know? I thought you talked to him about this. She's like, "You got to trust me. If I would have told him, he would have said no. But I guarantee you, he's going to be excited and he'll talk to you." And sure enough, she was right. But man, that was a moment of panic for me. And then to sit down with him and, just like he was an old man who just wanted somebody to talk to, like a lot of old men do. And so he was happy to tell the stories, to spill everything. And I think he just understood, right? Like one of the things about poker is people think because somebody won $1 million at one point in time that they're a millionaire for life. Like, no, in poker, there's a lot of people who win money and still fall on hard times. And he had certainly fallen on hard times. He, wasn't a prominent poker player or poker personality like he was in the 70s and 80s. I mean, this is 2013. So I think he understood. He, had built a good life for himself down there with family and friends. He still played poker occasionally on the side locally. And, I think he was just thankful to be back in the poker spotlight a little bit. And I was very more than happy to give him that spotlight.
outside of Bob Hooks, I mean, obviously traveling there and being able to cover that story is memorable and probably up there. Obviously you're a lucky guy to get to go to all these different areas to cover something that you love. But what's your favorite place to go?
I
If
think
you're
my favorite,
covering poker, let's leave it at let's start with that.
yeah. I mean, I think my favorite place that I've been is Australia, to Melbourne. I think 6 or 7 times. It's a pain in the ass to get there, especially when I was in Wisconsin. It was like 30 hours from when I left my door to when I got to the hotel. But I absolutely loved it there. But I also think the most unique experience I've had traveling for poker was in 2018. I had the opportunity to go to Vietnam to accompany arguably the most famous Vietnamese poker player, but he's also one of the most controversial poker players in our industry. A lot of people despise him, hate him, a lot of cheating allegations and things like that. And so it was a very risky assignment for me that I didn't have to take, but I decided to take. To go out and basically be an embedded reporter with this player for a week, see where he grew up, talk to him one-on-one, try to get the facts, the story, separate the urban legends from the truth, that sort of thing. And so to get to go there and experience Vietnam through that lens, through that manner where he's, taking me around, speaks the language, it was just a really cool experience for me, and ultimately led to another great piece that I'm known for and remember. That one definitely sticks out.
It's crazy. You mentioned Twitter back in the day, but even now, like I feel like if you have a bad encounter with somebody, or if somebody even wants to like put a stigma out there that's not true, like people could buy into the fact like quickly on that oh, this guy's a cheater, and they don't know the first thing about him. And being able to go and as they say, walk a day in someone else's shoes, you got to do that firsthand. Did you find out anything that you didn't know about this person, or were you able to like dispel any rumors that were out there by doing this?
Yeah, there was one big one that even to this day people still think it because clearly they haven't read my piece. But with this particular poker player, there was a long-standing rumor that he was kicked out of Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut because he was caught with poker chips in his room. This was one of the most cited things about how he's a cheater, and everybody knows this, what have you. So I'm like, well, people have been saying this for years, but is it true? And so I put in the research. I tracked down who was in charge of the poker room at the time, and I spoke with her, and she's flat out said, like, no, this isn't true. He was kicked out of the hotel, but it was because he had a guest, another Vietnamese guest, staying in his room who was cooking fish in the hotel room and set off the smoke alarm, and they were subsequently kicked out of Foxwoods. So yes, he was kicked out, but it was for totally different reasons. It wasn't because they found poker chips, right? And so, like, just dispelling that one big narrative, like, I'm not saying he didn't do things. Like, I'm pretty sure that maybe he did, but in this particular case, it was inaccurate, and it does make you question things, right? And for me, I try to doing what I do, try to remain fair, unbiased. Another one of my sayings that I tell myself and my writers all the time is like, it's not what we know or what we think, it's what we can prove. And, I try to work in facts as best we can. And, in this day and age and on Twitter, X, like you said, that's not always an easy thing to do. And in our industry, saying somebody is a cheater, there's no bigger accusation because reputation and honesty in your word in this industry that I work is very important.
Yeah, I mean, that's your livelihood, so to speak. If you get that stigma, nobody wants to play with you and nobody really wants you in their casino to play. So it's a very damaging, label that a poker player could have, or even a professional gambler can have, is that they're a cheater. But I will say this, for anybody going to the Foxwoods, don't cook fish. You just can't do it. Don't do it. As tempting as it might be to throw your mahi on your George Foreman in your room, like just hold off. Don't do it. Just don't. It's not worth it. Be walking to the next place. Who's your favorite poker player?
Oh man, before he passed away, it was Devilfish, David Ulliott. He was from the UK. He was a big reason I got into poker. He was on the World Poker Tour broadcast. He had slick back hair, wore a suit, had these knuckle dusters that said devil and fish. He just had a very James Bond villain-esque to him. I just loved his character. And I actually got to know him in his later years before he passed away. He was subsequently inducted into the Poker Hall of Fame. But aside from him, I'm a big Phil Hellmuth fan. A lot of people
will disagree with that. There's contention on old Phil.
He's very polarizing. A lot of people love him. A lot of people hate him. I love him. We're both from Wisconsin. I actually played at a lot of the same places he did when he was up and coming. I knew a lot. I know a lot of the same players that he played with back in Wisconsin. And I just feel like I understand him. We're from the same neck of the woods, so to speak. And yes, he is the poker brat. Yes, what you see on TV is part of him. It's not an act by any means, but away from the felt, he's a very devoted family man. Very big into charities and raising money for charities. And just, I believe he is a very good-hearted man. He is a narcissist, 100% without a doubt. But when push comes to shove, Phil's always been good to me, and I am a fan. So,
but I mean, he's good. Like, and I think a lot of times when he says things, he has some truth to what he's saying, and people just don't like that. And it might be the delivery on some occasions, but I mean, I think the crux of what he's saying a lot of times is pretty spot on. It's just how he comes across, or the perception that he's given people over the years. They just don't like him for whatever reason. But one thing that you can't deny is that he is a very talented poker player and one of the best to ever do it. So Survivor. Obviously, you and I met playing live reality game Survivor Angelica. We had the opportunity. We didn't get to interact. We were on different tribes to start. I don't want to give too much away because I don't want to I want people to tune in when it comes out in October and have a little bit of a surprise to them as what happens. So it's really hard to talk, about it
Yeah.
without giving too much away because I get fired up and I like talking about it. And so, but what I'll ask you is, um, are you nervous for any of the editing? Like for me personally, when I think about what could be put out there, I get a little nervous on how like I would be portrayed playing the game. Do you have that same kind of nervous anxiety, or you're just like, whatever, man. However they put me out there, they put me out there.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the latter. Like, however they do it, they do it. But I also think that harkens back to me having been kind of in the public spotlight through my industry a little bit, right? Like I've
Right.
had lots of experience being on video. I host my own show. I think that plays into it. But I also think, you know, without delving too much into our season, the game that we played, I had played an LRG before called Survival Challenge in 2022, and they're still working on those episodes. And like, I am curious to see what they do because I could very well be the villain. Um, in fact, I think that's probably where it will go. Even though in the game, I don't think I was necessarily a villain, but I could see them, editing that way, which I would be fine with. It's an interesting thing to me. um these games are just a fun challenge. They are a they're comparable to me in poker in a lot of ways, where there can only be one winner in tournament poker, what have you, but with the more physical social aspect to it. I don't know, I really enjoy it. I've only done a handful, but I hope to do more for sure. And if they're filmed, so be it. I think I'd be more worried if it was like real Survivor for 26 days, where like I can hide a lot of stuff for a day or two in an
Yeah.
LRP, but after a month, that might not be so easy.
My subtle quirks come out, after day 4 or 5 for sure. Like, the 3-day, weekend game, you're right. You could probably mask it a little bit better than you can um a longer version. Do you think you played the game different than who you are? Because I know people go into the game and they go, I am this person and I'm going to play as this person, or I'm just going to be me. I'm going to play like me. I'm going to, be, like for me, as much fun as it would have been to just be me, I think there's a little bit of me that was very reserved in this game. And I think it was a lot, and people will see I do have some confessionals where I talk about it, but um I don't think I had to be me. I needed to be a different version to kind of be in the game, so to speak.
Yeah, I definitely get that. So the first LRG I played in 2022, I decided to do two things. One was I lied a lot about who I was. I was almost 40 at the time, and in that game, 40 is on the older side of things. They usually cast a lot of people in their 20s, and having watched past seasons, I knew that they voted out the older people a lot. So one of my goals there was to I clean shaved. I know I look younger usually than I actually am, so I clean shaved, and I told everybody I was 30 instead of 40, which nobody questioned. So that was great. And then the other thing is, I didn't tell anything about who I was in poker, which is a huge part about who I
Oh,
am and my
yeah.
identity. I just fell back on the comic stuff that we talked about because I am well versed. I have comic book tattoos, so I said, you know what, I'm just going to tell people I work in a comic book store. And so I did. I didn't tell anybody during the game anything about the poker for a number of reasons. Like I think people have a certain conception about poker players, whether it's good or bad. They're very strategic, or they don't have any morals or scruples. I don't know what it is, but like I'm just going to avoid that altogether. Whereas in this game that we played in Survivor Angelica, I went the opposite route. I said, you know what? I am going to be more me. I'm not going to lie about my age. I'm not going to lie about what I do. I was just very upfront about it. And it was fun. Like it was a good experience just to kind of be me. Now, I didn't necessarily get to let out my game as much as I would have liked, kind of, as you described. Like the game can dictate certain things. And so there were points where I was like, man, I wish I could maybe play a little more aggressive or cutthroat, because I'm certainly capable of those things. But maybe the game didn't allow for that. So, but it was still a very good time. And as I mentioned, like, I'm addicted to it now. Like, I've already been applying for more. On this board that's blurred out behind me, I have 4 different games that I've applied to written down, because I'm hoping to hear back. So
I gotta get back out there and see. There, unfortunately, in Tampa, there's one that South Florida, University of South Florida, is putting on, and it's in my backyard basically. But it's during my daughter's birthday, so like I won't be able to do. I couldn't swing it, man. It was just too much. So
that's the hard part for me too, by the way. Like, a lot of these LRGs take place in the summertime, which conflicts directly with the World Series of Poker,
yeah,
which is the biggest event in my industry. So in 2022, when I went and played Survival Challenge, that conflicted directly with the World Series of Poker main event, which I had never missed in 10 plus years. And so to step away from that, I'm glad I did it. I'd do it again, but like, it was definitely a weird thing for me to like sacrifice a big part of who I am and what I'm about to be able to go out and do one of these things. But that's certainly much different than a daughter's birthday. So
yeah. I mean, it's if I want to be happily married and stay that way, I need to be at this birthday, which is fine. I trust me. I am okay with that. I love my daughter, and I love seeing her enjoy herself, especially on big milestones like her birthday. The actual CBS Survivor, new season kicked off last week. Are you a watcher?
I am a watcher. So I was turned on in the year 2000. I was still in high school, about to graduate. I watched episode 2 of season 1 when BB ended up getting voted out, and I've been a loyal watcher ever since. I've seen every season. I used to be a super fan, but I consider myself now just more of a run of the mill fan, right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
memorize everybody in that, but I have seen every episode. I am watching this season. Um, Something that blows my mind too is poker has led me to some great opportunities, not only traveling, but also meeting a lot of interesting people. And in a roundabout way, a lot of former survivors. I'm actually quite good friends now with Boston Rob,
Nice.
and yeah, Tyson Apostle and Adam Klein, who are all winners of Survivor, who all found their way into the poker world. I was actually at Adam Klein's wedding a few months ago here in Vegas, and that kind of stuff just in the moment is just like, okay, this is my life now. But when I get a moment to reflect on it, like being the fanboy of Survivor that I was, and now getting to know these guys, to be able to interact with them, certainly blows my mind a little bit.
It's a full circle moment, man. Especially a guy like Boston Rob, who's now he's doing Deal or No Deal Island. He's doing the Traders. Like he's probably gonna do Survivor 50, I would imagine. Like he's back on the scene, man. He's getting it.
And he's a good
Um,
poker player. He is
oh,
actually quite good poker player.
I was gonna ask you, if Survivor contestants, who would be the best poker player?
I mean, excluding the ones I just mentioned, because Boston Rob, Tyson Apostle, Adam Klein are all quite good, and some they've won some stuff. So, excluding those, I would have liked to see more of Kim Spradlin, Kim, who won One
Yeah.
Worlds. If you remember at Winners at War, on one of the first episodes, they talked about the Poker Alliance,
Mhm.
because it was Tyson, Boston Rob, and Kim was there, and Jeremy. They all played on this televised TV poker show called Poker Night in America, which I've played on myself a couple of times. But anyways, that was the first and only time I've seen Kim venture into the poker world and the poker space. But I definitely would have liked to have seen more. I think somebody like Parvati, would also be quite well, in playing poker. Those survivor players who can lie to your face and not break it, have that poker face. So
Yeah, I mean, that's what made them, who they are and how they were so good, is because they could get everybody on board with whatever they want, whatever narrative they wanted them to believe. That's what they believed, and they ran with it, and they built their games off of that. And people, what's crazy to me is like they will go and play another season or a different type of game, and people know what they've done, and they still just want to buddy up with these people. Like, hey, man, that's how you know you're good. That's how you know you're good at the game.
The ironic part about it is that any time a poker player has ventured into Play Survivor, which has happened like half a dozen times, they never do good. There has not been a poker player who has done well. JRB, John Robert Belland, the only one who's ever made the jury, and that was in Survivor China season 15. So I would like to get on the show one day and maybe dispel that notion of poker players not doing well. But that's a dream. We'll have to see if it ever comes true.
We gotta send your you just wait. In a couple weeks, you'll see Jeff on TV. He'll be asking for you to apply. You just send your video and your application in. You'll be good, man. Just hold out hope. Oh, definitely, definitely. With our podcast, we cover a lot of college baseball, and one of the cool things that we did this season, this was the first season that we did it, is we took all of our guests and we put them in like a draft pool, and we had myself, my co-host Jim, and two other guys that were members of the podcast network, and we all drafted former guests that we've had on in college baseball. We put them on 4 separate tribes, and every week we eliminated the top two worst performers, and we did Survivor. Basically, they were able to earn idols, for like 3 home run weekends and, complete games or 12 strikeouts and, hit, going 5 for 5 in a game. Like, you could earn idols, and it was unbelievable. We went from the beginning of the season, and it culminated at the conference tournament for these guys at the end of the season. And it was head and shoulders, like a lot of fun, but also like the players were invested in trying to win. They were like, am I going to get voted out this week? Am I going to get voted out this week? I'm like, I don't know, man. At the end, we had the top 3 players, and we had the jury of voted out players, do the same thing. They voted for the winner, and, it was amazing. It was very close, and being the first time that we did it, it was actually really cool. So, kind of bridging, what I enjoy with Survivor and live reality games, we do that with our podcast and our guests. So it was pretty neat to be able to do that.
It sounds like a lot of fun. It reminds me too, like, I'm a poker guy. We like to gamble on anything, and I have another poker friend who we bet every season of Survivor and Big Brother and Amazing Race. We do a draft. We $200, and whoever has the winners on their tribe at the end, wins. We've been doing that for years, and it's always a lot of fun. Puts a little more of a sweat and gamble into it.
Oh yeah. So Big Brother, what are your thoughts on Big Brother?
I'm enjoying this season. I felt like the last few seasons have been mediocre at best, but I've been enjoying this season a lot. It's been my guilty pleasure for a long time. And then there was a poker player who did Big Brother, Vanessa Russo, who actually did quite well.
Did well.
Yeah, 6-7 years ago. I don't even remember. But yeah, she was a friend of mine, and I actually was exchanging messages with her just a month or 2 ago. She's largely retired from the spotlight from poker and is raising a family now. But yeah, that was a lot of fun to watch. And I think this season is the most I've enjoyed a season since hers, to be honest.
We, Matt, the runner up from last season, we had him on the podcast, and this season, like I've thoroughly enjoyed this season. And this is coming from someone who I wasn't a watcher of Big Brother until this year. I went back and watched a few Vanessa Russo's season. That's the one that I went and watched that one. Last season I went back and watched, and then I watched this season from start to where we are now, and I enjoy it. I think there's a difference, but I think it would be a fun game as well to play, just like Survivor. But who do you think is going to win Big Brother?
Oh, like I don't hate to say it because I'd actually like to see it happen. Like, and I know most people will probably laugh, but like Angela is that sort of player who is the joke player for a while. People that stick around because, there's no chance that she's going to win. But then if she somehow gets to the end, people give it mad respect. Like, this is a player who we never took seriously, who managed to get all the way to the end. And, we're going to give the vote. So I could see that happening, but there are certainly strong players left. Mackenzie seems to be playing really well. What I really enjoy about this season, though, is there's been so many great players who are gone right now, right? There's so many times in these games, Big Brother, Survivor, where people just fall in line and the viewers like, how can you not get this person out? Clearly they're, you're just being sheep led to the slaughter. But that's not the case with this season whatsoever.
No.
Like, people who are power players are getting the boot. So I love it.
Yeah, I mean, Quinn leaving, I think, was a big move for them. Obviously, Tucker was a big voice and, I mean, a competitive threat, but he kind of sealed his own fate because he continually, played into that. He was like, nobody can beat me, nobody can beat me, until they did. And then he just put himself at odds with other people and he didn't have numbers. But yeah, I think Angela, if she makes it, I think she gets votes. I truly do, and I think it's just like you said. It's has nothing to do with her as a person or people liking her. I just think they're going to respect the fact that she went from crazy eyes in the very beginning to standing there at the end. Like, how do you do that unless you've played a pretty terrific game? So, um, well, with Survivor though, who you obviously we got one episode to kind of build a basis off of, but I believe that in maybe this is my own fault, but I think they should have voted out Andy last week. And spoiler alert for those of you if you haven't watched it, you should have already watched it, but um I think they should have voted out Andy. Nothing aggravates me more than when people dramatize their struggle and they do it in a fact where they didn't think it was going to be as hard as they thought it was going to be. And so, like, I'll ask you, like, do you think John was the right guy to get rid of? Do you think they should have done Andy, or was there someone else?
It's interesting because I agree with you in terms of him dramatizing it. I don't even know if it's intentional. Well, so like he reminds me of what I was 20 something years ago, like the immaturity, the lack of emotional maturity, if you will.
Yeah.
Like clearly he's in over his head. I'm surprised he passed whatever psych evaluation that the Survivor producers put these people through. Because he certainly seems to have some struggles there. Now, from a game standpoint, though, and his tribe, I get it from their perspective in that you start with 6 and you're going to lose one now. We could vote out the easy vote right now, right? Or we vote out the other person because Andy is still going to be the easy vote. So we're basically essentially protecting ourselves for 2 votes. Whereas if we vote out Andy now, who knows how things could change around with John. We kind of had a similar situation with our tribe in the game that you and I played, Survivor Angelica, to be honest, where we had this decision between 2 people at first. And so I get that aspect of it. But I mean, clearly Andy's a wild card, a loose cannon, and that can be a very dangerous thing to play around with in these games.
Yeah, we had Q from last season. He actually he's from an area where Jim and I are from, and was actually the realtor that sold Jim his house. But we had him on talking to him prior to him getting on Survivor. He got on Survivor, and I think Q was the same way. Like, you knew at some point he could be an easy vote, so you kind of just kept him around because the nonsense wasn't as bad as it could have been, and plus you always knew that you could get everybody on board at any point to vote him out. And I told him that, I'm like what was the thought process? And like, he legitimately in his eyes was like, this was my game play, this was my strategy the whole time. And I was just like, I was baffled. But hey, he got he was pretty successful. I think not so much at playing idols or any of them at that for that fact, but very successful. He got on and he did well, and he was a core person that people will talk about for a long time. But speaking of talking about a long time, podcasts. All right, tell me about the podcast. Where can we catch it? And like, when do you go live or do you pre-record and then upload everything? How does it work?
Yeah, so it is pre-recorded, and then we release the episode every Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific time, which would be 11 a.m. on the East Coast. Every Friday, very consistent. It's the Poker News Podcast. It's this year we added a video element where we're in studio. We give it kind of like a sports center kind of talking head feel to it. So it's very entertaining. It's a lot of fun to watch. My co-hosts, Kinda England and Mike Holtz, are very entertaining. So I highly recommend people check it out on YouTube at the Poker News YouTube channel. But if you are an old school podcast listener, we are, of course, available on audio only on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, pretty much anywhere you listen to your podcasts. We're just about to film our 858th episode of the Poker News Podcast. It's been
Nice.
around since November 2010. Of course, most of that was audio only days, but it's still been a lot of fun. I've been around for, I don't even know, a few hundred episodes now. So
Nice. Well, let's get to it before we get you out of here, man. Obviously, we've had a great talk, and got your story. We talked in depth about Survivor and all kinds of other BS, and that was the goal, man. I wanted to learn more about you, but also kind of talk about our journey together, and kind of why we connected. But we always play a game called This or That with every guest. Over 450 guests have played this game. So if you told me you didn't want to play it, you'd be the first. So no pressure. Are you down to play?
oh, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. So it's very simple. This or that. I give you two options. You choose one option or the other. Can't say both. Can't say neither. Got to go with your head, your heart, your gut, whatever. Just pick one.
All right.
All right. So this or that brought to you by Old Dominick Distillery. If you want bourbon, vodka, whiskey, or gin, I'm telling you, 150 years of tradition gets it right. They've been distilling in the heart of downtown Memphis for 150 years, even through Prohibition, through the days of no liquor. Old Dominick's has been the go-to. How they did it, I don't know, but stop in for a tour and find out. But also, if you want to go in, check out the samples, get a taste, get a flight, do everything you can, because let me tell you something. You're talking about top-notch, top of the line bourbons, and I'm a bourbon guy, I'm a whiskey guy, and I can speak to those things, and they are the best. And I'm not just saying that because they're a sponsor. I'm saying that because I don't put my name behind anything that I don't like. Behind me, we got 2 bottles of the best stuff around. So check them out, Old Dominick Distillery. You won't be disappointed. All right, with that, Chad, first question. Vegas or Wisconsin? If you had to pick one for the rest of your life.
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, really? Is it? Do you think that you're going to be back in Wisconsin at some point?
Yeah, I have no doubt about it. I have my family, I have some, investments, some rental properties, my friends. I like the water. I like the green. I like to do things outdoors. I love Vegas, but Wisconsin is always going to be home. And I imagine, yeah, at some point I'll be back there.
Gotcha. Would you rather win a huge pot on a bluff, or would you rather outplay a person, keep them in the hand, and force them all in, thinking that they have the best hand, but then you show them who the boss is?
I would rather win one by bluffing because I've done less of that in my career. I've done a lot of the other that you described.
Yeah.
So I know I need to bluff more. And so that's what I would rather do.
Do you feel good or do you feel bad, like when you're able to bluff? Obviously, there's you got to feel good about it, but I mean, is there a little bit about it that you're like, dang, I feel really bad, like I got that guy? Like,
I never feel bad about it. Like, this is a zero-sum game in poker. They're trying to take my money. I'm trying to take theirs. I think it's fun.
true.
Like, it sucks when you try to bluff and they call you and like read your soul. Like, oh, what did I do wrong? But when you execute a bluff successfully, it is really one of the best feelings in all of poker.
Yeah. And like you said, one of the worst feelings is when you get caught and you're like, when you get caught, do you feel like, oh man, like, do you think they feel like you're a terrible player, or do you think are you thinking more about what they're thinking of you, or do you even care at that point?
Oh no, you care. Like you question everything, and depending on how they call you, right? Like if you bluff and they think for 2 minutes and then they call, you think, okay, at least I came close, right? We really put them to the decision. But when you bluff and they're just call, like they snap call you,
Snap call.
it's like, what did I do wrong? That like they didn't even believe a single thing. Like, it is very demoralizing. It makes you question a lot of things.
Yeah, I bet. What do you like better, European Poker Tour or the World Series of Poker?
Oh, I like the European Poker Tour better. That's not easy to say because the World Series of Poker is the biggest brand in our industry. I have a bracelet, but when it comes to quality of the product, nothing really beats the European Poker Tour. They know how to do it. They do it right, and it's just the different locations. The World Series of Poker is in Vegas. We know that it's been here for 50 something years. The European Poker Tour at least goes to these different locations throughout Europe, and I really like that aspect of it.
What have you when you've been and you've covered the European Poker Tour, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
When you go, do you get a chance to play? And if you do play, is it a different style or a different speed than what you find in America?
Yes, I have had the opportunity to play, and yes, it can be different. And it really does vary from region to region, right? Like Brazilian players play a certain aggressive style that you might not see a lot in the US. Likewise, German players or Scandinavian players develop these tendencies. And a lot has to do with, they study together, they learn from each other, and they will go through an evolution together, if you will. And so it's up to the rest of the poker community to adapt. But as a whole, I think European players are better and tougher than US players.
All right. All right. What suit would you pick? Hearts or diamonds?
Oh, I'm going to go with hearts.
Spades or clubs?
I'm going to go with clubs.
All
It's
right.
interesting. The suits of cards represent certain things.
Uh, all right. So what's your favorite suit then?
Probably hearts, I think.
Hearts.
Hearts, if I recall correctly, are supposed to represent royalty, the
Okay.
royalty, whereas clubs represent warriors, the army. Spades represent the low folk, the farmers who have to use a spade, the shovel, if you will. And then I think diamonds represented the more working class. It's something like that. They all represent a little something. And I don't know, hearts, romance, suicide king. I always like that.
I feel you. I can get down with some hearts. All right. Comic books or comic book movies?
Like most source material, the books are always better. Comic books, it's still one of my favorite forms of entertainment, my favorite medium. So yeah, comic books.
Do you do you think that the comic book movies, do they do the comic book justice? Because there's a lot of people out there that go, oh, they did a movie and they left out this and that and all these different things and these subtle nuances that were a big deal when I was reading the book, but then in the movie they weren't even mentioned. So with you, is there the same things that happen when they try to take the book and translate it on screen?
I think it varies. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, has done a great job of taking source material and being very close to it. Others, like the X-Men movies from 20th Century Fox, which aren't in the continuity, aren't so great, if you will. And I think as the years have went by, it's gotten a little less and less quality, if you will. But as a whole, I think they've done a pretty good job in the MCU. And I'm a hardcore comic book geek, and I really enjoy most of the movies. They're not all hits, of course, but as a whole, I think they've done a good job.
So this past Wolverine and Deadpool movie, obviously, I'm sure you've seen it. Are you a fan of that style?
Yeah, actually, this one that was one of my favorites. I thought they hit it out of the park. They they took a lot of stuff that weren't necessarily hits, made fun of it or incorporated it, and I don't know, I just thought they did a really good job I enjoyed every minute of that movie.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool character where, and you would know more than I would about like how he's supposed to be portrayed, but that sense of like badassery, but also like buffoon and like comedic relief, like I appreciate that in my movies. Like there's a lot of action, but there's also some funny stuff in it too. So like I think that's my perfect mix of movie.
Yeah, it's a perfect adaptation of what the Deadpool comics were. It's funny because back in the day, Deadpool for me and a couple other people before the movies were like our very secret enjoyment. Like only a certain amount of people knew about Deadpool and appreciated Deadpool, right? So it was like this secret society of people who appreciated Deadpool because it wasn't mainstream. And then the movies came out, and then everybody loves Deadpool, and it's like, oh, I was in that fan club before everybody else, and now it's, it's still great, but it was just like, oh, the special aspect of it is gone because now it's open to everybody. But that's a good thing because everybody loves Deadpool.
It's like all the kids now when you see them wearing, Golden State Warriors gear and Steph Curry stuff, you're like, man, 20 years ago you wouldn't even have been caught dead in any of that gear, man. And here we are. But
I
hey,
hope this one day the same can be said of the Miami Dolphins.
hey, I hope so too for your sake. I mean, I just hope your quarterback can get back on the field. That would be a tragic way to not be able to get back on the field. But if he doesn't, like I could definitely understand that too. I don't know if he's got the broadcasting chops in him, but maybe he can coach. Who knows? He might have something. But either way, last question, and I'll let you bounce, Chad, man. And this is a big one. Would you rather see the Dolphins win a championship? If I was like, here you go, Chad, Dolphin championship this year, you can take this, or you can have 250K, and really it's to get into the super high roller World Series of Poker event. So you take the 250, you can only get into that tournament, but you could maximize that 250 into something else, or you could go for the sure thing and get a Dolphins championship. Of those two choices, which do you take?
I'm glad you put the asterisk on it because if it was 250K in my pocket, I was going to take 250K. I'm not a fool, but I would go with the Dolphins championship based on this criteria only because in those tournaments that cost that much to buy in, you're talking about the best poker players in the world. And while I might be good or maybe above average, I am nowhere near their level. So I don't feel confident that I would be able to turn that into anything. And like, look, I've got 40 years sunk in Dolphin fandom. I worry about ever getting to see them win a championship in my lifetime. And so if I had the opportunity to do it, I think I would take it because, man, I dream of that day. So fingers crossed it actually happens. But
We when we give athletes these college athletes this question, we'll ask the baseball guys, we'll say, would you rather win a national championship or be the first player in the draft? And the first player in the draft last year, $10 million is signing. And these jabronis will take a national championship over the easiest $10 million they'll ever I'm just like I get it, like from I'm a team guy and we're gonna work hard and we're gonna achieve this goal type deal. But like nobody is ever just gonna give you 10 million that easily. So like I don't know. That's just me. But yeah, I'm definitely a money guy just because I'm 40, I have two kids, and the money definitely matters to me way more than any of the other accolades that you could give me. So
we have a similar question in the poker world that essentially goes, would you rather win the bracelet or the money? And it is really split down the middle. Some people will take the money and don't care about the bracelet, but for other people, the bracelet is what it's all about. So I understand both sides of the coin.
does the money is great, but does the bracelet get you anything? Like obviously notoriety and just being a part of history to say I want a bracelet. But outside of that, does it give you like premium access to any like unpublicized events, or like does it give you like the opportunity to go do shows and make like more, like what does it do? Like why would they choose the bracelet over the money?
I mean, it does do a couple things. Like if you win a bracelet, I think you get like a diamond card from Caesars for a year, which gets you, hotels and discounts and things like that. So that is a nice little perk. They have done events like a bracelet winners only event. So the only people who could play it is people who have won a bracelet. So there are certain things like that, but largely as a whole, no. And the reason people would choose it is just because it's like, it's kind of in poker, they say there's two sorts of poker players, those who have won a bracelet and those who haven't. Maybe like in football, those who have won a Super Bowl and those who haven't, right? Dan Marino is always
Right.
going to be one of the greats, but he's never won a Super Bowl. And so I think that just means a lot. They've done a great job at branding the bracelets. That being said, there used to be a lot less bracelets available. So they were very hard to come by, very prestigious. Where now in this day and age, they keep adding and adding to it. And it's kind of diluting the value of a bracelet, which is a whole debate within our industry. But yeah.
All right, Chad, 40 bounce, man. Anything you want to plug or promote?
Yeah, just check out the Poker News podcast if you have an opportunity, available on audio and any of the major podcast platforms, or on the YouTube Poker News channel every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific Time. Check me out on Twitter, or X as it's called, at Chad A. Holloway. And if you are ever at a poker event, if you're a poker guy, feel free to hit me up on X. Let me know you'll be there, and we'll see if we can't get you some love on Poker News.
Let's go. That's Chad Holloway with Poker News, everybody. If you like hearing Chad's story, or you just like hearing us average Joes talk X's and O's, please like and share the podcast on Facebook, retweet us on X, listen and subscribe wherever you stream your podcast. As always, comments, ratings, feedback, thumbs ups, hearts, hugs, love. We'll take it all. We'll see everybody. We got the Torriella brothers, Baltimore bred guys, going to tell us their story tomorrow night. And Thursday afternoon, well, mid-morning, brunch time, you're going to get the rundown headlines with Jim and I. We're going to be doing it live. We got to talk Dallas Cowboys. We got to talk Memphis Tigers. Just, it's been a rough day for me in the sports world. So I'll get a chance to decompress all that. But we'll also look forward to slate of games and the stories for the upcoming weeks. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in. As always, remember, strong body, sharp minds, grit and grind all the time. We are out.